Good to have you with us on this Wednesday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for being here. We're going to begin this morning at the Vatican, where the secret conclave to elect a new pope is set to begin behind the closed doors of the Sistine Chapel in just a few hours.
This conclave is expected to have 133 cardinals. They come from all over the world to vote for the next leader of the Catholic Church. The cardinal electors, as they're known, began the centuries-old rituals of the conclave earlier today with a morning mass at St. Peter's Basilica. This year's conclave will be the biggest and most geographically diverse in the Catholic faith's history. NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter is live at the Vatican with the very latest. Molly, good morning. So just tell us more about this morning's mass and what we can expect to happen next.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. You just missed some biblical rains, and now the sun is shining on the first day of the conclave. Joe, as you mentioned, the Mass happened earlier this morning inside St. Peter's Basilica. It was a special liturgy. It's called For the Election of a Roman Pontiff. Now, it was presided by Cardinal Ray. He's the Dean of the College of Cardinals. After Mass, we're told that the Cardinals headed back to Santa Marta for a little rest before the action gets going this afternoon. So you guys, around 4:15 p.m. local time, we will see that procession. So the Cardinals will gather, all 133, as you mentioned, of the electors in the Pauline Chapel. They will then process to the Sistine Chapel, and they will be singing, you guys, the Litany of Saints. It is seen as kind of a guiding hand that will help Cardinals choose the next pope. And then once inside, you guys, that is when the cameras cut out. We will not see anything after they individually take these oaths of secrecy. They will be standing in front of the Last Judgment, and underneath Michelangelo's creation. You guys, what a majestic moment. We will actually see that on camera. And that is when we hear extra omnis, everyone out, the camera cuts out, those doors are closed, and the voting begins.
Molly, it is this sort of secretive process. I think we're all fascinated to learn the details you just laid out and want to know more about what happens behind closed doors. What do we know about how the Cardinals have spent the last few days preparing for this?
Yeah, Savannah, so obviously I was here during the week that Pope Francis died and during the funeral. I then went home, but what was happening here in Rome was actually pretty dramatic, kind of Bravo-level drama, if you will, during the general congregation. So what happens in those congregations is people can speak freely. They're meant to stick to kind of 5-minute interventions, they're called, but a lot of cardinals, we understand, because of leaks to the press, mostly the Italian press, went over. And that is when kind of the real discussions get made after hours. They go to a glass of wine, they go to dinner, they have these conversations in apartments. And I actually spoke with our NBC News Vatican analyst, Chris White, about some of the kind of political maneuvering. Take a listen.
There's a conversation that's happening inside the room, and there's a conversation happening outside the room, but they're not entirely separate. And so the Cardinals want people outside of the room to know what's happening inside so they can influence what's happening. It's sort of almost this grand circle, going in circles.
That's also dramatic.
Yeah, it is dramatic.
It adds a real level of drama.
It is dramatic because it is politics at the end of the day. I mean, of course, everyone that's going to go in that Sistine Chapel, they're going to take a vote, but everyone's also aware that leading up to that vote, there have been thousands of speeches, countless hours, dinners, coffees, all shaping how this is going to play out.
Countless hours of dinners and coffees. You guys, one of the interesting things that Chris told me, too, is that there are actually kind of cardinals designated to whip votes. So they do have kind of a little internal tally, not a tally that we know as they head into the Sistine Chapel, but certainly there's a sense, Chris says, among the cardinals of who may be the leading contenders, who may be kind of lagging behind. But once inside the Sistine Chapel, no speeches, no more lobbying, just voting. Guys?
I cannot wait for the Bravo show Real Conclave at the Vatican. Molly Hunter, as always, thank you so much.
Gosh, it really is fascinating when she puts it that way. For more on the conclave, let's bring in Dr. William T. Kavanaugh. He's a professor of Catholic Studies and the director of the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology at DePaul University. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us, Doctor. Let's just first talk about who this person may be. What qualities do you think the cardinal electors are prioritizing when casting their votes for a future pope?
Well, it's quite an extraordinary combination of qualities that are needed for the job, really. You need to be a pastor, so you need to be a good communicator and touch people's hearts. You need to be a theologian, so you need to keep an eye on the doctrine and keep a firm hand there. And you need to be a kind of CEO as well. And it's a large organization of 1.4 billion people. So you need to be a good manager. And it's really quite an extraordinary job to hand to somebody who's usually already of retirement age and should be sitting on a beach somewhere, but has been asked to do this job. And I think most of them are probably reluctant to say yes.
And we've talked and made a lot of Pope Francis's legacy and his somewhat progressive nature and vision for the church, the direction he moved it in. How do you imagine those facts kind of trickle down into this process, the conversations that are going on, as Molly just explained, both, on-site and off-site, as people have these discussions? Do you think that that's a big focus here, and how do you see that playing out?
I think it is a big focus, and a lot of people have different views about Pope Francis's legacy. So there's going to be, on one side, people saying we need to continue this. This was just what the church needed. This kind of closeness to the people at the margins, the poor especially, a kind of pastoral approach before a doctrinal approach, that you touch people's hearts before you try to clarify the doctrine. A reform of the finances, the globalization of the church, the inclusion of women and laity, synodality, this process of conversation, most basically. And a lot of people think that this is the direction that the church is going to need to continue to go in, and Pope Francis has pointed the way. And then there's another faction that is going to try to, that thinks that there needs to be a correction of course. And so the byline amongst conservatives these days is that Pope Francis was peculiarly divisive, and we need unity in the church. I don't think that's actually the case. I think every pope has people that disagree with him. It's just that this pope had a particularly vocal opposition. But they're going to be looking for doctrinal clarity. They're going to put the brakes on synodality. But I think that's a minority of the voting cardinals.
Dr. Kavanaugh, I'm sorry to do this to you, but we have to ask as we kick off this day, who do you think the top contenders are for the papacy?
Well, how long do you have? I mean, I just saw a list of all of the contenders that have been named by various news outlets, and the list is 25 guys long. So it's really, one of the things that makes this particular conclave so hard to handicap is that Pope Francis named cardinals from all around the globe who don't have Vatican experience. They might be from Mongolia or Brunei or Central African Republic. And we just don't know much about them, and they don't know much about each other. They haven't spent a lot of time with each other, and they're just getting to know each other. And so there is a long list of contenders, but I wouldn't put too much stock in it. One of the main people that has been talked about, the leader, if there is one, is Cardinal Parolin. He's the Secretary of State. He's been Pope Francis's kind of leading diplomat, and he's seen as a kind of middle-of-the-road figure. He's not known for being charismatic, but he's known as a diplomat and as kind of a centrist figure. And he seems to be what most pundits think is the front runner, but I wouldn't put too much. I wouldn't go out and bet your retirement account on that.
Lots to watch for here. Fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for joining us on an important day.
Oh, my pleasure.
This morning, there are signs of a thaw in President Trump's trade war with China. U.S. officials plan to meet face-to-face with their Chinese counterparts this weekend to talk trade. There's still no signs, though, of a trade deal between the U.S. and Canada, despite Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to the White House yesterday. The leaders met amid mounting tensions over tariffs on Canadian goods. President Trump repeated his belief that it would be beneficial for Canada to join the U.S. as the 51st state, something Carney flatly rejected repeatedly.
As you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together.
NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell joins us now with the latest. Kelly, good morning. So President Trump had a pretty unfriendly relationship with Canada's last prime minister, Justin Trudeau. He often mocked him by calling him Governor Trudeau, as if Canada were part of the U.S. So overall, how did this meeting go between the president and Prime Minister Carney?
Well, Joe, expectations were high. This is an important relationship that has been going through a period of real strain. And this was a chance for these two leaders to meet face to face for the first time. And so Prime Minister Carney, of course, made so much of his campaign, which had in the early stages been an unlikely path toward the prime ministership. He used Donald Trump's attacks on Canada as part of his appeal to Canadians. So he came into the Oval Office with some of the trademark niceness, politeness of the Canadian people. And Donald Trump also did some of that as well. The president acknowledged that they had a warm meeting, nice meeting, those kinds of terms from President Trump. But we definitely saw that there are still big issues when it comes to trade, and there are tensions. But they went through the performative part of each kind of setting their lane. For Prime Minister Carney, it was important to stand up to President Trump, to do it in a nice way, but to be very firm about the fact that Canada will remain a sovereign country, part of the United Kingdom Commonwealth, and at the same time saying there's opportunity to work together, identifying Canada as the largest consumer of American products. So it is a start, and we'll have to see if they can actually get to a point of a resolved trade deal. The president's also been talking down the prospect of having written, signed agreements with a number of countries.
Well, let's talk about another trade war front. You've got these first boats carrying Chinese goods with 145% tariffs arriving in L.A. this week. Shipping volume is expected to plummet, leading to fears about shortages this summer. So this newly announced meeting I mentioned between U.S. and Chinese officials, what could that achieve?
Well, that is a breakthrough, and we've had very mixed signals from this administration about the state of communication between the U.S. and China on the tariffs issue. The president had repeatedly suggested that there were talks happening. The Treasury Secretary, appearing on Capitol Hill, made clear there had been none on the issue of this new round of tariffs. So he will be meeting with his counterpart in Switzerland in the coming days, and that has not been defined exactly the parameters of what they will discuss, but they will try to talk about ways to resolve what is one of the most consequential trading relationships on the planet. The president did say he expects to have a reduction of tariffs at some point, and that would, of course, then spur more trade and an opportunity there. So a very hot thing to watch, because, as you suggested, if there are store shelves that are bare, that will be a problem for the president and for the economy.
Kelly O'Donnell, thank you so much.
Well, the Federal Reserve is expected to keep interest rates where they're at when policymakers meet later this afternoon. That is despite pressure from President Trump on Fed Chair Jerome Powell to lower that rate. As always, investors will be watching closely for any clues from the central bank about the state of the economy and where rates could be going over the next few months as businesses continue to feel the effect of Mr. Trump's tariffs. We'll dig more into all this in our next hour.
This morning, President Trump is now allowed to implement a controversial ban on transgender people who are serving in the U.S. military. Yesterday, the Supreme Court granted an emergency request from the administration to lift a nationwide injunction that was blocking the policy while litigation moves forward.
The policy disqualifies people who have, quote, been diagnosed with gender dysphoria from serving. It also bans those who have received gender-affirming medical care. Now, this ruling could affect more than 4,000 transgender people currently serving.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Zavalos is here to break it all down. Danny, good morning. Okay, so lower courts had blocked this ban on trans troops. The SCOTUS is essentially removing that ban, at least for now. So what exactly does this brief order say? What's the impact right now?
It doesn't say much, but what it does is it actually rules consistently, as the government had argued, with a prior decision back during the first Trump administration, which allowed a similar ban to go forward. So I don't think this was too much of a surprise to any of the litigants, because the Supreme Court has actually kind of been here before. And even though they had the argument, the challengers had the argument that there might be this irreparable harm, after all, employment, continuing service in the military, if that's lost, that could be a form of irreparable harm. What the government is arguing, and I think this is very critical, is that this is not discrimination that violates the Fifth Amendment. If this is discrimination, it's based on a medical condition, gender dysphoria. And so the government argues when that is the kind of discrimination involved, then you don't look at it with so much scrutiny at the courts. In other words, it's easier to discriminate against people based on their medical condition, and probably particularly so in the military, where the executive branch has such discretion.
So, Danny, what would you say the plaintiffs have to argue, have to prove to get this overturned?
So you take a step back. What a lot of folks don't realize is that almost every kind of discrimination in employment is lawful. The law says there are narrow categories where it's unlawful. Your race, your gender, things like that. So what you often see in discrimination cases is the plaintiff saying, I was discriminated against based on this protected class. And then the defendant says, no. We were discriminated against you based on any of the other infinite reasons that are perfectly acceptable. And that's what's happening here. The plaintiffs are saying this was based on equal protection, and you're discriminating against us based on our membership in a protected class. The government's saying, no. Gender dysphoria, everyone agrees it is a medical condition. And when it comes to medical conditions, the scrutiny is very low. In essence, we win because you can discriminate in the military based on a medical condition.
All right, so you've got the Defense Department data says more than 4,000 transgender people currently serve in the military. Some argue the number is actually much higher. Regardless, for those service members who have been caught in limbo right now, what does this actually mean for them right now?
So the administrative question is a little hazier. It's not really that legal at all. The reality is, maybe even the government itself, the administration, isn't sure exactly how they're going to implement this ban going forward. That may look like something in the next 30 days. It could look like something that moves very quickly. But now that it's out of the court and the ban is permitted, it's really up to the administration to figure out how they want to do it.
All right, Danny Ceballos, thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. Well, former top officials are sounding the alarm over growing vacancies at the National Weather Service, and this is right in the middle of tornado season. Recent and proposed cuts mean fewer forecasters are on duty. That's sparking concerns that communities could be left vulnerable during severe weather. NBC News national climate reporter Chase Kane has more.
Right at dinner time on April 17th,
we have a tornado warning issued for Pottawatomie County.
Supercell storms started producing tornadoes across eastern Nebraska.
I was really scared last night.
Our Omaha affiliate reporting homes and cars badly damaged, windows blown out, roofs ripped off, one family caught off guard.
We didn't think anything of it, and then my wife started screaming at me, so we hightailed it to the basement, and it was about 20 seconds after he got down there that it ripped through.
Luckily, everyone survived, but with only seconds to spare, is it possible they could have gotten an earlier warning? What we do know from an official bulletin is that the Omaha National Weather Service office didn't have enough staff to launch regular weather balloons that day. Only one instead of two, which meant their data was hours old and only showed the threat of hail, not tornadoes.
And that's impossible to forecast when and where. Not having that data could have saved a life or created a warning that had greater lead time. But if you do it over and over and over again, I can promise you that not having that data is going to be a problem when it comes to forecasting.
And it's all because of a political tornado. DOJ federal employee buyouts and cuts earlier this year, leading to that, quote, lack of office staffing. And now in a rare move, every living former director of the National Weather Service, dating back to President Reagan, is warning that President Trump's proposal to cut NOAA funding by nearly 30% will lead to a, quote, needless loss of life. We reached out to the White House, and a Commerce spokesperson said, in part, NOAA does not anticipate any disruptions in services as a result of staff reorganizations, and the NWS will continue to meet its mission of ensuring public safety amid critical weather events. But a former NWS director disagrees.
We are generating kind of a Swiss cheese weather service. We have holes throughout the Weather Service now that are not well thought out.
Republican Congressman Mike Flood represents the area hit by those 6 tornadoes on April 17th with a short-staffed weather office. So he called the White House to get more meteorologists to Omaha.
For decades, the National Weather Service personnel have not been classified as public safety. They are clearly public safety, and that's something that we need to do in Congress.
The last NOAA administrator, Rick Spinrad, also tallied that so far, staff cuts have cost the Weather Service 7,000 years of collective experience.
It's like having incoming missiles and not being able to tell anyone when they're coming or where they're coming.
A NOAA spokesperson told NBC News work is underway to restore services at local forecast offices around the country.
There are things in NOAA that I'm sure could be improved, but you don't do that improvement with a hatchet and just randomly cut large chunks. Weather in this nation should not be a political issue.
Our thanks to Chase Kane for that report.
Speaking of severe weather, let's get to your morning News Now forecast with Angie Lassman.
Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. No surprise, we've got another day of rain in the forecast. We've got a couple of spots that's going to focus, but you can see it's really ramped up along the Gulf Coast already this morning. This is going to be one of the trouble spots, and essentially extending from Texas all the way to the Florida Panhandle up through Atlanta. It's a soggy morning for New Orleans, Mobile, Montgomery, and these are just some of the spots that we're going to watch for the potential for flooding as the day goes on. We've already got really saturated grounds, so no surprise if the additional heavy rainfall in this region causes some flash flooding. We've already got those flash flood warnings that are in effect as well. Here's the setup. We've got this system that's going to keep that kind of focused across parts of the south, but we've also got some of these scattered storms that'll be focused for the plains and the Midwest through the day today. And then notice tomorrow, it's basically from the northeast to the southern plains that we see the potential for some of those unsettled weather and some of those stronger storms. So we'll be watching for that here as we get into tomorrow as well. Today, here's the area that we'll watch for that severe threat into the afternoon and evening hours. Victoria right in the bullseye of that. Hail looks to be our biggest threat. As far as the flash flooding is concerned, New Orleans, New Iberia, Houma, all included in that moderate risk. But this really extends from essentially Texas out to the Florida Panhandle, where we could see that flash flood risk. And for good reason. Anywhere from 2 to 3, even up to 4 inches of rain, additional rain on top of what we've already had, will be possible through at least Thursday. Now, the other side of this is that that wet pattern is going to continue for the mid-Atlantic to the northeast as well. We've got a front that's going to move a little farther to the north. This ramps up that flood risk as we head into the end of our work week. So notice that low will sit just off the Jersey coast, and we see all that kind of steady rain hanging out eventually basically over this region as we round out our Friday. We'll see some improvements for basically New York and points south as we get into Saturday, but still some kind of rainy weather for New England. And we are going to be concerned once again of that flooding as we get additional rainfall on, no surprise, those saturated soils. So anywhere from 2 to 3 inches, guys, through Saturday. It'll be a soggy one, but much better by the time the weekend finishes.
That's good. Every now and then I feel like I'm living in Seattle, and this is one of those times where I was walking through New York this week, and I'm like, feels like Seattle.
You remember that glowing ball in the sky? What is that called?
We'll see it again.
He'll be back.
Thanks, Angie. Got it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.